She said it like asking for a glass of water. I want both you and Brandon, why not just stay my safety net? Her lips lifted at the corner, a small smirk that felt like a hand nudging a vase toward the edge. The city glowed behind our windows like a patient fire, and the bowl of half-eaten pho on the counter suddenly didn't matter. The peonies on the table were 4 days old, drooping, exhaling sweetness into a room that had forgotten what sweetness was for. I watched her in the reflection, watched my face stiffen around the truth, and realized the moment was irreparable. There are sentences that don't ask for answers. They don't argue, they rearrange the room without moving a thing. She had returned from another strategy session with Brandon Reeves, the photographer with yacht parties and an attention span calibrated to the length of a headline. She was neon, laughs too bright, eyes too awake, fingers tapping a rhythm that had no space for sleep. For the past 3 months, I'd been the back into her brand, the code behind the gloss, the scaffolding behind the marble. She used to look at me like I was the room. Lately, she looked at me like a power outlet. No plate broke, no voice rose, that would have been easier. Instead, she stood by the sink and offered me a spreadsheet, 2 columns, 2 lives, 1 safety net. Be flexible, she said. He's not replacing you. He just understands this world. The world where love is content and content is currency and intimacy is something to edit until it gleams. The world where lines blur as a strategy. I rinsed the bowls, I wiped the counter. I sat on the edge of our bed and listened to the ceiling fan draw circles in the stale air. Her phone buzzed 3 times. She watched me with that anthropologist stare, curious to see what the subject would do. Say something, she said, and there was a softness in it like she cared not for me but for the shape she hoped I would make. I didn't. Words felt like a trapdoor. When she fell asleep, I packed 2 duffels, a backpack, the laptop. The drives with everything her business ran on. Vendor dashboards, booking automations, the clean spine of a system that never missed a beat unless the human behind it did. I touched the Cira Weddings app on her home screen, a gradient logo I built in the mezzanine between 2 tired nights, and turned the phone face down. I wrote a note on plain white paper. 15 words that had grown inside me like ice. You wanted both worlds, so now you can have neither. I'm choosing myself fully. I slid it beneath the peonies and watched a petal let go. Dawn smelled like bus station coffee and cold air. Neon hum, wheels hissing, strangers learning to be unremarkable at the same time. The road out of the city unspooled like a long exhale. I powered my phone down when the first voicemail came, the voice I knew too well saying my name like a password and then turning it into a plea. Fields in winter colors drifted by, the beige and rust and silver that teach the eye to be gentle. There's a quiet after a hard choice, the kind that doesn't celebrate, only steadies. It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like closing the door to a burning room. Portland met me with damp air and porches, with sidewalks that could forgive a person for not knowing exactly who they were next. I rented a small room in a Craftsman with creaky floors and a cat named Solve who decided I could be furniture until proven otherwise. During the day, I took contract work at a studio in the Pearl. Clean code, honest tickets, pull requests that felt like stacking bricks in the right wall. In the evenings, I walked to the river and let light sit on the water without anybody asking it to brand itself. The body remembers, then forgets, then remembers the forgetting. The first week I was a ghost carrying my own name around. The second, I started noticing steam over manholes and the way a bakery lets out a warm breath when the door opens. By the third, I slept without performing. Sometimes I woke with my hand curled like it held something that wasn't there. I opened my palm and let the night pass. Her reach didn't stop at texts. Samantha doesn't accept absence. She tries to choreograph it. My ex-manager sent a message. Heads up, someone claiming to be your girlfriend's mom is calling HR daily, says family emergency. 17 calls, she offered money for contact info. 17. I pictured Samantha scripting it, note cards, escalations, the perfect places to cry. Then the reconnections arrived like old satellites re-entering the atmosphere. College acquaintances, mutuals I hadn't thought of since the yearbook was relevant. Just checking in, they said. She's worried about your mental health, one said bluntly. Maybe call her. It read like concern and tasted like surveillance. Then came the Instagram post, a photo of my note beside a block of professional handwriting analysis. The expert concluded my letters showed controlled detachment and deliberate spacing. The caption asked whether that meant I was still processing and open to communication. She had paid a stranger to authenticate my boundary, then spun it into content. The comments were a chorus of hearts and theories. Watching it through a friend's phone felt like seeing a house you used to live in turned into a museum, tourists taking photos of the kitchen where you learned to boil water. I met Claire at a plant shop called Verdant on Alberta where the fiddle leaves looked like they believed in mirrors. Which pathos is the least dramatic, she asked. The one that has learned to be ignored, I said. She laughed and invited me for coffee without making it perform as anything else. She listened like it cost her nothing to leave silence where answers could grow. On a hike, she showed me Samantha's post the way some people point out a rare bird. She's building a whole arc around you, she said. Like a season. We stood on a ridge in a wind that combed the trees and let the ridiculousness and the ache sit next to each other like two people on a bench not speaking. Brandon blinked in month 3. He retreated to Miami Sun, telling mutuals she was too intense and always analyzing this note. The business cracked along seams I used to seal at 2 a.m. Double-booked clients, payment snafus, a booking system crash she couldn't resurrect. I didn't gloat. Gravity doesn't gloat, it just keeps doing what it does. Screenshots stacked up. DMs from accounts with names like Wellness Sky Amber, always a variation of the same message. She just wants to know you're safe. The past isn't a ghost, it's a machine that runs on attention. I stopped feeding it. By month 4, a planner wrote, "She's unraveling, she needs you to stabilize." I closed the laptop and stared at the rafters, feeling the old tug, a muscle memory of rushing in with duct tape and code. That night I rewrote the note not to send, but to check if my hand still believed my mouth. The letters were steady. The spacing was air enough to breathe. I thought that would be the endgame, noise then quiet, but Samantha is fluent in escalation. Her next move arrived sounding like home. The number was new, an Oregon area code that could have been a plumber, a dentist, a friend of a friend. "David," the voice said when I answered, soft and ragged. The sound of a person who'd stayed up to find the exact words. "Mom's in the hospital, she asked for you." The floor shifted a degree, I could feel in my knees. "What?" It came out flat, the body's first defense against old maps. "She fell," Samantha said, swallowing. "A blood pressure dip. I can't get her to calm down unless she knows you're okay." A pause, a breath shaped like a time we were still us. "Blaze." All the rehearsed wisdom, boundaries, detachment, the cool geometry of leaving felt like paper and rain. I had liked her mother, a woman who kept snacks in her purse and gentle opinions she would not impose on anyone. She had given me a scarf the winter I got sick, knitted, uneven, beautiful. "Which hospital?" I asked before the rest of me could stage a debate. It was across town, white corridors, and the antiseptic smell that never quite becomes background. I found them in a room lit by late afternoon. Mrs. Chin looked smaller, not fragile but scaled down like someone had taken the world and moved it one click farther away. "There you are," she said and squeezed my hand like a final knot. Samantha watched me with eyes that knew the blueprint of my guilt. "Thank you for coming," she said, nothing sharp in it, no smirk, no brand. Just the old voice, medium warm. Brandon had been good at lighting, she had always been good at tone. I stayed until the monitors learned to hum without turning every beat into an alarm. Samantha told me about the fall, then not about the fall. Stories about clients fraying, vendors murmuring, an event gone sideways when the app crashed, and she had to lie to keep the schedule from collapsing. She told me about how Brandon left like weather, how Miami was louder than apologies. I listened without offering fixes. A nurse stepped in and out like a grace note. Claire texted to ask if I needed anything like water or perspective. After 3 hours, Mrs. Chin dozed and the room shrank to the two of us. "I messed it up," she said. "You were right." The words seemed to cost her. "I thought I could have both. The work and the myth of invulnerability, you and the brand. I thought love could just wait on the couch while I figured out how to be this. I could taste the old ache, the one that makes a person mistake empathy for obligation." "You didn't want me," I said quietly. "You wanted insurance." She flinched barely. "I wanted certainty," she said. "You were the only certain thing I ever had. I wanted to see how far I could push and still have you there. I hated myself for it, then I hated you for letting me." There it was, the honest ugliness, the part the brand never says out loud. We sat with it, letting the machines breathe for us a little. "Is this the part where you ask me to come back?" I asked, not as a dare, but because the script was hovering in the air like a prompt. "This is the part where I ask you to help me fix what you built," she said. Just help me stabilize, I'll pay you, I'll sign whatever, I'll take your name off everything. I don't know how to hold it together without you." The old reflex warmed up like a machine I thought I'd unplugged. The dashboards, the API calls, the vendor integration that sometimes timed out if the request didn't have exactly the right retry. My hands knew it. My hands were hungry to be useful. That hunger felt suspicious and very, very familiar. "No," I said. It surprised both of us how gentle it sounded. "I won't come back to be your mesh. I won't do the quiet work so the bright work can forget what holds it up." Her face tightened, then reset. "Okay," she said. "Okay, what would you do if it wasn't me, if it was a client?" I should have stood up and left. That would have been the clean line. Instead, I found myself sketching in words without admitting it was advice. "Freeze new bookings for 2 weeks. Communicate honestly, no spin. Refund proactively on anything that even smells off. Hire a real ops lead, don't charm this into working. And stop using people like instruments in a song you won't finish." She looked at me with something like grief, something like gratitude. "I deserved that," she said, "the last part." "It wasn't a punishment," I said. "It's a map you can ignore." We left when Mrs. Chin's sister arrived with soup and a soft authority. In the corridor, the world regained its fluorescent insistence. "Can we talk?" "Not here," she said. "Coffee." "Neutral ground." I wanted to say no, I wanted to say every smart thing I'd learned in the last 4 months, but grief had cracked a window and a breeze I knew too well came through. 1 hour, I said. Public place. She chose a cafe near Laurelhurst, all blonde wood and rain-rinsed light. She arrived in a sweater I bought her last winter. It landed between us like a small theft she didn't order. She held the tea like it took both hands to claim warmth. I've been thinking about the note, she said. A lot. I made it into a myth because myths sell, but I know what it means. It means I made you choose between dignity and proximity, and you finally chose. I waited. I'm not going to ask you to come back, she said. I know what I did. I am going to ask you to give me a chance to make amends. The word felt clinical. 12 steps in carpeted rooms. To whom, I asked. Me, your clients, yourself. All of us, she said. But I can't do it if I'm constantly haunted by the idea that you hate me. Hate is a dramatic word for a person who was once the weather of a life. I don't hate you, I said. I just won't be your net. Her eyes glossed, then cleared. What if we set rules, she said. Not as lovers, as people who once loved. You tell me what would make it possible to coexist without me trying to pull you back. I thought of boundaries like bridges. Not to connect what should be one, but to let separate things nod across the water. No back channels, I said. No friends recruited. No emergencies except actual emergencies, and only family level, not business. No posts about me direct or coded. No analysis, no myth. If you want to apologize, do it once and then let the apology work quietly. She nodded like writing it down inside. And you, she asked. What will you promise? That I won't use your collapse as entertainment, I said. That I won't be cruel from a distance and call it healing. That I'll leave you alone so you can fail or succeed without my eyes on it. A silence opened that felt like a clear sky after a storm, empty enough to be dangerous and necessary. Can we start there, she asked. We can try, I said, but I won't be pulled back into the house because you opened a window. She smiled without showing teeth. You've gotten good at this, she said. That's staying. I didn't tell her that staying was a new language learned in small, unphotographed rooms. We left without touching. That night, a message came from a blocked account, a photo of the cafe and the caption, "You look happy." It wasn't from her, it was from the machine she'd built without realizing it, a fandom of watchers, narratives with mouths. Claire read it, then looked at me. You okay? Yes, I said, and discovered it was true in an uncomplicated way. But this isn't over. The thing about a boundary is it's only as strong as the next good reason to cross it. 2 weeks of quiet felt like a treaty that might hold. Samantha posted nothing that could be read as a subtweet of our past. The DMs slowed to a trickle. Her business put up a note about temporary booking pauses to enhance client experience. I smiled at the euphemism and let it pass. She hired someone with a title that sounded real. I took more hours at the studio. Claire bought a pathos she promised to ignore, and it thrived like it loved neglect. On a Thursday, a man in a navy blazer knocked on my rented door and asked for me by full name. He handed me a thick white envelope like he was delivering a newborn. You've been served, he said, and performed a small bow of apology that didn't reach his eyes. Inside, a demand letter alleging that the code and infrastructure I'd built were proprietary to Cira Weddings, that I had retained access, that my note constituted intentional interference. There was a line about damages that made my throat dry. I stood in the kitchen, reading and rereading, the cat weaving around my ankles like punctuation. This wasn't her voice. This was the voice of someone she'd hired or someone she'd become by hiring them. It didn't matter. The effect was the same, a weight in the chest, a heat in the face, the body preparing for a fight it didn't want. The old reflex reached for the quickest fix, call her, make it make sense, solve it quietly. The new reflex said, lawyer, breathe. Don't make the room smaller than it is. Claire sat across from me that night while I mirrored the letter with my own words, factual, measured grain by grain. You okay? She asked again. I'm angry, I said. And I miss the version of me that would have taken this as a cue to fix her world for free. Anger can be a boundary, she said, just don't let it be the architect. The lawyer I found was exactly the kind of person you want when you don't want to be anyone's story. She read quietly, asked precise questions, and used the phrase bad faith in a tone that could chill tea. We drafted a response that turned the volume down while saying everything needed. That all access had been revoked the night I left, that all rights to code written under my personal name were mine, that anything commissioned afterward had invoices and deliverables attached like clear tags, that I would countersue if harassment continued. The letter ended with one of those sentences that sound like marble, govern yourself accordingly. It should have made me feel invincible. Instead, it made me want to take a nap in a sunbeam. The human body was not built to metabolize this much performance without a price. The next day, Samantha called. The old number, the old name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice arrived controlled, footnote calm. I didn't know about the letter, she said. My new COO handled it. I'll handle her. A breath. I'm sorry. I waited an hour, then I called. This can't be how you do amends, I said without preface. I know, she said, it's not. I'm drowning, David. I hired a person to keep me from drowning and she's pouring concrete into the pool. Fire her, I said and surprised myself with the bluntness, a humorless laugh. There's a process. Stop using the word process when you mean fear, I said. The code was mine. The builds we did after were billed. I owe you nothing. We can coexist or we can litigate. Choose. I choose coexistence, she said, that old decisive spark flaring. I'll fix it. Then fix it, I said, and hung up before the conversation could be anything else. She fixed it. The COO vanished from their about page like a typo. An apology email came from a new address, short and formal. The silence that followed felt earned for the first time since I left. For a week I went to work, came home, watered the plant I never asked for and learned another small shape of contentment. It didn't last. Nothing does, but this ended because of proximity, not entropy. Portland is a small city that likes to pretend it's bigger than it is. On a Saturday at the farmer's market, I turned a corner and ran right into the past wearing sunglasses. David, she said, stepping back, hand on her tote like it was a heartbeat. Hi. Claire was a step behind me, a basket of herbs on her arm. There was a second where everyone was unmasked and then politely putting their faces back on. Samantha's gaze took everything in, Claire's easy stance, my unstartled body, and registered a loss that had nothing to do with commerce. I didn't mean to ambush you, she said. She gestured to produce like it could finish the sentence. It's a market, I said, we're all ambushing each other. Claire smiled kindly, said, Hi, I'm Claire, and offered her hand. Samantha shook it like a person who knows civilized gestures at scale. Can we talk for a minute? Samantha asked me, just air. Claire looked at me with the kind of trust that says, your past is your past, I'm not its warden. I'll be by the honey, she said, and drifted away. Samantha and I stood facing a stall of peaches that smelled like forgiveness and teeth. You look steady, she said. I am, I said, mostly. How do you do it? She asked, and there was no performance in the sentence. How do you stop wanting the thing that wants to eat you? I remind myself that hunger is not a compass, I said, and I let the boring things be holy. She laughed in the way a person laughs when they recognize a truth they wish was a joke. I'm trying, she said. I hired an ops lead who tells me no, I'm not posting about my feelings anymore. I'm letting them live in rooms that don't have cameras. I'm glad, I said and meant it. She looked at me and for the first time since we broke, she didn't ask with her eyes for anything. I'm going to walk away now, she said, half smile. Before I remember 10 different ways to ruin this moment. Good plan, I said. She took a step, paused, David. Yes. The note, she said, I finally wrote my own to myself. I waited, it says, choose one world fully even if it breaks the other, then live in it without apology. That's a good note, I said. Keep it. I will, she said and left. At home, I told Claire the whole scene, the peaches, the sentence about hunger, the note she wrote to herself. Claire listened with that inexpensive attention and then leaned her head on my shoulder. You sound free, she said. I'm learning how not to owe storms my windows, I said. It's new. We cooked, we ate, we didn't narrate it for anyone. Later, a message arrived on my phone from an unknown number. A photo of me and Claire at our kitchen table, taken from outside the window, grainy, a voyeur's prize. The caption, do you really think you can hide? The past had put on a ski mask and found my street. The police report felt like theater with bad actors. The officer was sympathetic in the bureaucratic way, discount card for a security system, a pamphlet on stalking that read like a tired prayer. It's probably a fan, he said. Or a rival or an ex's ex, just be careful. The studio moved me to a flexible schedule, let me work remote for a while with the unspoken understanding that remote was a place where nobody could take your picture. Claire suggested we spend a week at the coast. Salt scares ghosts, she said, half joking. We rented a mossy cabin that smelled like prepositions, under, above, between. The ocean reminded me that my life was small and that smallness could be a gift. On the second night, my inbox pinged with a burner email. Subject line, you can end this. The body, meet me at Irving Park, 7 p.m. alone. If you don't come, the photos go wider. I stared at the screen until the words lost meaning, then came back worse. This was no longer Samantha's orbit, not directly. This was the machine made of her myth, whirring without her permission or with it but beyond her control. A person pushed into content becomes a story ball rolling downhill, gathering debris and strangers. The only way to break it is to step aside, or to put a foot out at the right angle and risk a break of a different kind, I told Claire. She squeezed my hand and said, we're not playing their game. Then she looked at me like she could see the version of myself that wanted to go, to end it decisively, to confront, to be the actor again. But if you do go, she said, we do it smart. At 7 p.m. Irving Park is a collage of dogs, runners, and people who think dusk is a kind of privacy. I wore an old hoodie and the part of my face that says harmless. Claire sat in the car with the engine idling, phone in hand, location shared with 3 trusted friends. The air smelled like wet leaves and a future no one could guarantee. He approached from the basketball court's tall, expensive jacket, a face that had practiced angles. "David," he said, as if we were already in agreement about something. "Thanks for coming." "Who are you?" I asked. "Someone who knows leverage," he said. "We can keep this clean if you want to keep your tidy Portland life. People love a disgrace story. Yours would make a good carousel." It clicked then, not a fan, a competitor. Somebody in the wedding-adjacent content farm who saw Samantha's notemyth as a vein and wanted to mine me for the rest. Not personal so much as market logic. That made it worse in a way that felt clarifying. "Delete the photos," I said, keeping my voice balanced, "and I go back to being nobody." He smiled with 3 teeth. "That's not how ecosystems work," he said. "You can, however, pay to slow them down." Claire texted then. "Police 2 minutes out, I saw the lights half a block away." The man saw them too, and his smile evaporated. He stepped back into the shadows with a shrug that said next time, and then there wasn't a next time because 2 officers walked him back into the light and discovered a pocketful of other people's windows. The station smelled like old coffee and stories with wrong endings. We gave statements, we handed over phones, we let the slow wheels of consequence turn a fraction. He wasn't the whole machine, just one cog willing to be obvious. The bigger engine was elsewhere, in feeds and group chats and the part of culture that confuses attention with oxygen. When it was past midnight and the world had exhaled enough to sleep, I texted Samantha. "Someone from your orbit tried to blackmail me. It's handled, keep your house clean." Her reply came at 2 a.m. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I didn't know, I'll post tomorrow to shut it down." "Don't," I wrote, "don't feed the fire, starve it." "Okay," she wrote, "then are you safe?" "Yes." The next week she did something harder than posting. She reached out privately to a handful of people who organized the whisper networks that amplified drama for profit. She cut ties. She lost reach, she let the graph dip. I heard about it not from her but from a planner who said, "She's bleeding cool points and doesn't seem to mind." It's not redemption, it's a gesture. But gestures accrue into roads if you keep walking in the same direction. Claire and I came back to the city and did something radical. We lived, breakfast at the table like a ceremony, walks that had nothing to resolve. Work that felt like work, not penance. The photo from the window lived in a folder named Weather. Sometimes I opened it to remind myself what lines are for. In month 6 a letter arrived, not legal, not scorched, handwritten. The kind of ink that comes from a pen you would borrow and return. It was from Samantha. "I won't ask for forgiveness. I am practicing the kind of apology that doesn't need to be witnessed to be real. I made you into a function, then punished you for executing. I made my fear into an aesthetic. I made pain into a product and then called it empowerment because the lighting was good. I released the people I used to make you orbit my life again. I released the ones who used me to orbit theirs. I am smaller now. I think that's what alive feels like when it's not televised. I'm not asking for a reply. I'm asking permission to stop asking for anything." I read it 3 times, put it in a drawer with a scarf, and felt something unclench that had calcified into part of my spine. The open loops remained. What does recovery look like without performance? What is love when it isn't an audience? What would it mean to let the last thread go and mean it? The answers were not urgent, they were seasonal. The heart has seasons no algorithm can accelerate. There's a point where the story a person tells about themselves no longer holds under the weight of evidence. Samantha hit that point in late autumn, the world damp and deciduous, the sky a low-held note. She restructured her company in public filings that only people like me read. Pay transparency, operations split from creative, a new COO with a resume built from fixing instead of scaling. She didn't announce it with a carousel, she let the results do the talking. The volume of noise around my name decreased like someone had closed a window. We saw each other twice in the city by accident and didn't rearrange fate to make it mean anything. Once at a bookstore where she was in the grief section but holding a cookbook. Once on a sidewalk where we exchanged a nod like neighbors who had survived the same winter. Claire and I moved into an apartment that had windows tall enough to mistake for ambitions. We painted a wall the color of sea glass. The cat decided we belonged to it and brought us a moth and the kind of pride that says you are welcome here because I think of you when the hunt goes well. Love grew like a low plant, steady, green, not interested in theatrics. One night over a pot of linguine that refused to be al dente, Claire asked, "Do you think you'll ever talk to her again, like really talk? About what you both learned?" "I don't know," I said. "Does the past need exit interviews?" "Sometimes," she said, "sometimes silence is a story too." I thought about that. About silence as a kind of punctuation that changes the meaning of the sentence before it. "If we do," I said, "it has to be because the conversation is a gift to the present, not a tribute to the past." A week later, Samantha asked for exactly that. Not by text, by a letter dropped in our mailbox, distance respected, request clear. The letter said she was doing a private inventory of harms and patterns. It said she wanted to include the part where she made me a safety net and then tried to turn my no into content. It said she would accept no as an answer and would not ask again. It said she had questions only I could answer, and if I didn't want to, she would learn to live without those answers. I read it aloud to Claire. She nodded. You can say yes, she said, if your yes is to yourself. We met in December at a tea house that smelled like an herb garden knew a library. She arrived in a coat that could have been a statement and wasn't. She looked like a person who had been introduced to reality and decided to keep it. Thank you, she said, and we let that be the opening. I brought the note, I said. The original, I placed a photocopy on the table, not as a flex but as an artifact. She traced the 15 words without touching them. I hated you for this, she said softly, because it made me small. Because it made me see what I had made you into, because it was final. It wasn't final, I said. It was specific. It was the only way I knew to stay human. She nodded. I know that now. I thought having both worlds meant I was expansive. It meant I was divided. It meant I expected other people to be elastic in ways I refused to be. We talked like people who once built a house together and now walked through it on a tour, pointing at the places the floor creaked. She told me about the adrenaline addiction, how success had become a justification for cruelty because the metrics said she was winning. She told me about Brandon, who had been a symptom, not a cause. I told her about the quiet after I left, how it had been terrifying and then medicinal, how boring saved my life. What do you owe each other now? She asked then, almost to herself. Nothing, I said. But we can choose something smaller than love and bigger than nothing. We can choose decency. She smiled, a small winter sun. I can do decency. We left with no promises, no future rendezvous, no narrative arc begging for a bow. It felt adult in the way that being tired and honest feels adult. Less glitter, more ground. 2 days later, the last open loop tugged at my sleeve. An email from a kid at my old college. A senior building a wedding startup with a dream, a deck, and a plan to scale without infrastructure. I've been following your story, he wrote. You're kind of a legend. I almost deleted it, then I wrote back. Legends are lies with lighting. Here is what's true. Choose one world fully. Pay your ops people first. Don't turn the person who loves you into your business model. I included a list of 10 very boring things that would save him years. He wrote back, this is not what I expected. I wrote, good. Then I closed the laptop and watched the cat decide a sun square on the rug was destiny. The ending didn't announce itself with trumpets. It arrived like a morning with the right amount of cloud cover. Samantha texted once months after the tea house, a message with a photo attached. Mrs. Chin in a garden, the scarf I had kept folded in my drawer replicated around her neck, new yarn, new uneven stitches. The text said, she taught me I'm making softer things. I stared at the picture and felt the kind of ache that isn't looking for a fix. I wrote back, I'm glad, tell her I said hi. Samantha replied with a heart, plain, red, not ornate. Claire and I went to the coast again in spring. The water was still cold enough to argue with, the sky in a mood to forgive. We stood at the edge like two people granted visiting hours at a better life. What did the note save? Claire asked, toes in the foam, hair stuck to her cheek. Me, I said, and maybe her. Maybe us, she said, and put her hand in mine. The climax of this story isn't a confrontation in a park or a plot twist in a lawsuit. It's smaller and harder, choosing, then choosing again when the next scene offers an easier betrayal. It's letting a person live without narrating their living. It's refusing to make hunger your compass. It's learning the holiness of boring, the sacrament of making dinner without turning it into a parable. Samantha rebuilt, not the brand into a bigger brand, but the self into a person who could live without constant proof. She didn't become a saint. She became someone who can knit a scarf and give it away because warmth wants to travel. Her company stopped being a narrative factory and started being a job for people who wanted to be good at their jobs. It stopped trending, it started paying on time. Success changed clothes. We didn't get back together. We got something better, the kind of distance that honors what was without asking it to be again. When we pass in the city now, we pause, we nod, and the air doesn't thicken. It's not an epic, it's a practice. On a Tuesday evening 6 months after the tea house, she sent one last message. I took the handwriting post down, I answered. I know, she said. How? I said, because it's quieter. She said, thank you for writing the note. I started to type, then deleted, then wrote, thank you for reading it. At home, I pulled the photocopy from the drawer, the 15 words that had once been an axe and now were more like a door. I slid it back beside the scarf. I turned off the light and joined Claire at the table where 2 bowls waited and a plant leaned toward us like it had chosen the direction on purpose. We ate, we laughed about nothing. The world didn't need to watch, that was the win. We ate, we laughed about nothing. The world didn't need to watch, that was the win.